Over the last 2 to 3 years, this channel has attempted to reveal what was really happening in Venezuela. This fake make-believe story about how socialism fails, quote unquote, all on its own. People that were normally very suspicious of the media, very suspicious of the government, just fell right in bed with them and went right along with the whole narrative and the whole story. Well, over the last couple of years, it has become very apparent that something very different is happening. It started with sanctions, meaning Washington, D.C. had to punish any other country that was doing business with Venezuela. And that didn't work. Then they seized currency. They seized bank accounts here in the United States, billions of dollars. Then they had Great Britain seize gold. Then they intercepted fuel shipments coming into the country. They intercepted food shipments in Colombia. We saw the humanitarian aid convoy that fell apart. Most recently, we saw two former American GIs attempting to do something on behalf of some ridiculous company out of Florida. But now we have this. Venezuela says it captured U.S. spy targeting two oil refineries with heavy specialized weapons. So let me get this straight. When Venezuela even attempts to refine its own oil inside its own borders, that's a violation of something. That's the definition of socialism failing all on its own. Now, we're going to keep up on this story. There's very limited information about who this individual is. I'm sure we'll be getting a picture very soon. However, we had another topic that kind of goes alongside this ready for today, and I want to start in kind of a strange place. You see, years and years ago, I'm 50 this year, played high school football. I'm sure a lot of you did. And you learn a lot from high school football. You learn about being on a team. You learn that time is short, really, because just about the time you get started, it's all over. But there is something that happens, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's experienced this, that kind of makes you think. During the playoffs, or even at times when you have to play away from home, when you get to wherever the visiting field is, the visiting team usually has to use some type of alternate locker room facility, because you can't have both teams in the same locker room, right? Well, most of the time in smaller communities around the country, it's usually the girls' facilities. So in away games, especially sometimes during the playoffs, you find yourself having meetings, team meetings, at halftime and before, in pink locker rooms. Now this, like I said, I played back in the 80s. I'm sure this has probably all gone away now. I heard the University of Iowa does something like this just to be funny, but it's this idea of separate but equal. That it's been ruled in our courts that separate regarding education is inherently unequal. Brown versus Board of Education overturned Plessy Ferguson. Now, there was a lot of pushback to this. I'm sure many people are aware of all the details of what happened back in the 50s and 60s. But one of the things that was being stated at the time by the opponents of this was that it wasn't for the courts to decide because education was not a legal matter. There was really no constitutional provision that said a state had to even provide public education, and that it did so of its own authority, and that there was no federal authority that applied to this. Now, before people start saying, okay, you're a racist or whatever, I'm going to link this down in the first pinned comment so that you can read it. It's called the Southern Manifesto, and this was the pushback to that ruling. Now, with that all in mind, I want you to read this new article, this new story that is recently broken. 19 families buy nearly 97 acres of land in Georgia to create a city, quote unquote, safe for black people. Now, this is Wilkinson County. This is Macon, Georgia over here. Just zoom out real quick just so people know where we're at. Out here, I believe it's east of a place called Toomsboro, which is here. These black investors have purchased this huge swath of land where they want to promote being black and black life and black ideas and making black people wealthy. I thought separate was inherently unequal. And what's more, I don't think they understand truly what they're doing. Because let's say some wealthy white person had decided to buy it for them and say, you know what, we feel bad. We feel bad for you folks. We're going to purchase this land out here for all you black people to go live on. Oh my goodness, can you imagine? Can you imagine if some white person had done this? For black people, or even for white people? For any race? I mean, is it not bad enough that there are black colleges? And black magazines? And black this, black that, black the other? Now, they get to have their own little commune out here. But wait a minute. I don't think, quote unquote, the Freedom Georgia Initiative, which is what this is called, really has thought this through. See, they've created an LLC to do this, hoping black people will flock by the thousands to this region. Well, what happens to all of the regions where they're coming from? By definition, those regions would then become more white, just by the loss of the black population. So then what? This is another article talking about this, where it's really about money. Black-centric community in Georgia. Fresh start. They wanted to call it Freedom, Georgia. The name of the city being Freedom. About this woman who started going to a therapist, but what's going to happen when they have to come up against the state of Georgia? Who's going to provide the security? Who's going to provide all of the different things? Is it going to be like what we heard where the Patriot Prayer guy, when he got murdered, somebody on a bullhorn saying that they have the ability to take out the trash? Is that what we're going to hear? Now here's the part that should really make you sit up and think about this. See, they wanted to buy this small town. And they talk about this article that says that for every $100, quote unquote, a white has, a black family has just 10. Now, we can demonstrably prove this wrong in the reported income numbers. There is a disparity, but it's not 10 to 1. But there was something in here I wanted to share with you guys that was absolutely just beyond the pale. Scott told Insider that the initiative is focused on building the community from the ground up with the help of black-owned businesses like banks and contractors, but the area will be open to everyone eventually. A place we can all be proud, have human dignity. Well, when is eventually? Quote, you don't have to wait on the politicians and the rappers and everybody to help us. We have to help ourselves. Since acquiring the land, the initiative has held events to start providing a community feel in the area, including the, quote, big black campout. Can you imagine substituting anything I have just said with the word white? Can you imagine the end of the world that would occur to anyone trying this? It's just beyond the pale. It's totally beyond the pale that this is even being allowed. See, they're basing this off this article that says about this huge 10 to 1 income disparity thing when I can show you right here, and this is a Wikipedia median income, 58,000 for black Americans, 89,000 for white alone. 114,000 for Asian alone, but doesn't seem like anybody's talking about that, huh? I wonder what level of exclusionary is going to be good enough for these people. I wonder what level of exclusionary is going to be good enough. Because people like to talk about all of the thought that should be allowed in society. This is a picture from a movie in France called A Moment d'Égarement. And it's about a guy on the left who allows his preteen or early teen daughter to date one of his 50-year-old friends. So I wonder if that's going to be allowed in Freedom, Georgia. Because clearly they're going to have their own laws. They're going to have their own standards of decency. They're going to have their own standards of right and wrong. Guys, if you think Cuties was bad, you should see what's going on in Europe right now. And this is all tied together about this idea of self-determination. And I'm all for self-determination, but we also have to have a society. We also have to have a society that has standards of behavior and standards of right and wrong. And this is where things are getting sideways quickly with this idea that because I believe a certain thing, I should be able to go over here in this area of the world and then create this CHOP or CHAZ or, in this case, Freedom, Georgia, and then we'll just make our own standards of right and wrong and decency and good and bad. That's why I have said that we need to re-elect Donald Trump. Even with everything going on in Venezuela, which I don't agree with, what's happening in Washington, D.C., and no pushback from the current leader, what's happening here, while nobody is watching, is far worse. Because that's what this is really about. This whole self-determination thing. See, there's ideas that we have for a long time said don't have any place in civilized society. And now those people are saying, wait a minute, I thought we had to be completely inclusionary. I thought we had to include every possible thing you could think of. Every possible lifestyle you could think of. And justify it. You can't in a civilized law and order society. And if we lose that, if we lose the law and order society, nothing else matters. It all falls apart. And I'll just leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.